Embers of Hope by Nyan Sanketsu, Chapter 16, Landing Strategy. Geronimo! The madness begins. Landing Strategy. Fragment. Ruby wasn't the sort to gush. She wasn't one for romance or drama or any of that weird stuff that happened whenever Naruto stepped into the room. She liked to think she was above that sort of thing, and yet when she saw him on the cliffs of Beacon the next morning, she found herself wondering, her bestie looked kinda nice in red and black. They matched. Gah, no, treachery and traitorous thoughts. Shook her head and slapped her cheeks until they stung. Nope, no gushing, none at all. Alright, maybe she did gush a little, but only when weapons were involved, nothing else. Really, it wasn't her fault they were so cool and shiny or chrome. Focus. And besides, she was excited about this. The little reaper reined herself in just in time to hear Osmond finish his speech atop the cliffs. And so, I wish you all good luck. His eyes caught hers, and he dared to win. I'm sure you all deserve a place here. That drew a murmur from the other aspiring students on the launch pads. Well, those who weren't children of Salem. She saw a few people who she didn't recognize. A girl with striking red hair and green eyes, alongside a bashful blonde boy wearing piecemeal armor. Those two were just the most notable. There were others, but this far down the line she couldn't see them properly. Naruto caught her eye down the line and dared to wave. Well, until Cinder elbowed him. Ruby wriggled restlessly in place, knees shifting to and fro. Now then, the headmaster coughed into a wrist. I wish you luck, and pray that you have a proper landing strategy. Yes, showtime. She'd been looking forward to this. Maybe this wasn't the right way to go about being a huntress, not when she was tainted, not when she was tainted like this, but it was something she wanted for herself. Going to school with all her friends, check. Learning to master her powers in a relatively safe place, double check. Get herself the best gosh darn partner she could. Well, she was working on that. So what if mom said this was wrong? So what if she disagreed? Naruto was Naruto. Weiss was, Weiss. They weren't monsters. Alright, maybe Cinder was. No matter what she might say, Ruby loved Summer with all her heart and soul, but at the end of the day, this was her life. Hers to live, win or lose, success or fail. All she would succeed, but get herself a partner, snatch a relic, and find her way back to the cliffs. Easy game. Her speed made her all but a shoo-in for this, and yet the fear nagged at her. Dad had given her his full support as he did in all things, but Mom had been so angry with her. Ruby felt the pad tense beneath her feet, the thought well away, and she gathered herself to leap, silver eyes alight, and then, quite suddenly, she found herself airborne. Best initiation ever! She shot through the air like a crimson spear, grinning from ear to ear. The trees rushed up to greet her with their leafy branches, yet rather than deploy crescent rows, she went for a more adverse approach. Silver eyes burned blood red for all of an instant, a quick thought drawing upon her power. She didn't dare transform fully, not even here in the air, but she didn't need to. A partial shift was more than enough, not enough to be seen, yet just enough to strengthen her thin legs beneath her dark stockings. No one saw the skin there shimmer whiter than bone. None noticed the blood-red veins that crawled across her thighs, or the way her smile darkened, if only for a moment. Yep, this was definitely cheating. She hit the first tree she found and kicked off it at speed, channeling her momentum downward into the unsuspecting wood. Dark bark burst and roots ripped, but she wasn't there to see it. She was gone, hurtling away into the air again, slower this time, her speed slow just so. Still, she heard the tree fall behind her. Oops, gotta watch that. A chagrined smile touched her lips. Girls shouldn't be able to kick apart trees. Whee! Nor did it do subtle. Never had, never will, never would. Even before her corruption, she'd been the sword to swing first and think later. Now, she didn't even try to control her descent. Rather, she trusted in her aura, brandishing magni hilt, and struck the ground like a falling star from on high. And she sticks the landing. She struck a triumphant pose. Now where's my partner? Silence reigned supreme. Guess I'm going to hunt for him. Mercury crashed backwards, metal legs flailing in the air as he cackled. Seriously, you, of all people, is this fate or something? Emerald bounced the rock off his head. Shut up. She was still scowling when the barrel of a gun pressed against the back of her head. Don't move. How childish. Really, the very notion of launching teenagers into a forest filled with grim wasn't just juvenile, it was simply foolish. Not Elam Salem herself was so foolish as to simply throw potential recruits into the deep end. Wait, hadn't she already done that? As such, Cinderfall treated this initiation with all the respect she felt it deserved, which is to say, not at all. She landed with a rush of cold blue fire, eyes burning with wrathful golden flames, not a hair out of place. Her descent was flawless, as expected of a maiden. Now then, she tutted to herself. Where did he land? And Ursa rose out of the brush not a yard away, startled by her presence. A dark brow rose to regard the mindless brute. Really? The beast took one look at her and scampered, as it should before its future queen. She listened for the sound of combat, heard a familiar voice, and stalked towards it. She had a student to retrieve. Once more, the brush parted behind her. Really? An irate Cinder whirled to face it. Haven't you learned your lesson? Her voice trailed off as she found herself face to face with a familiar pair of blue eyes. They weren't those she sought. They were too bright for one, and framed by a curtain of white hair. That was all she saw, all she made eye contact with, before common sense reasserted itself, and she slammed her eyes shut. Please be the younger one. Please be the younger one. If there is a God out there, please don't let it be. You must be joking. Her eyes fluttered open. Winter's knee scowled back at her. Rest assured, her new partner snarled. The feeling is entirely mutual. Bitch, you did not just mess up my hair. Coco Adele quirked a brow at the unlucky pack of people she'd stumbled upon. Not Beowulf's actual people, armed soldiers with guns. Her right eye began to twitch. That's it. Everything dies. All too easy. Weiss dusted herself off, straightened her combat skirt, and preened a little. Really, her landing had been flawless. 10 out of 10 if she said so herself. Mission accomplished. Now she had a partner to hunt down, and she best hunt him quick before a screaming young man hurtled past, propelled by a rocket spear. He slammed into the tree opposite her with a whim. That was all she heard, all she experienced before she knew it wasn't him. Nope. Weiss whirled and walked the other way before she could make eye contact. Not my blonde. John whined a little as she retreated. Ow! Thankfully, a redhead came to his rescue. Ruby plunged into the canopy, hollering at the top of her lungs. Despite her peril, she couldn't stop thinking about her team. Well, future team. She supposed it was terribly distracting, really. If she had to pick a partner, she wanted it to be Naruto. No, that wasn't quite right. It had to be him, if only because she was the only one. He was the only one she could trust not to drive her crazy. Yang was nice and all, but Yang would baby her to death, to say nothing of the others. Mercury and M might be a good choice, but if she actually interacted with them at all back in the tower, she'd barely said 2 words to either. They were Cinder's minions, and nope. She wanted nothing to do with Cinder. Weiss might be nice, Winter maybe. She was a little scary. Blake, too kinky. Nora, oh gods, not Nora. Anyone but Nora. She'd eat her alive. Ruby turned away from that ugly thought and bound herself into the brush. All the world a whirl of green. Crap, she'd gotten distracted. Landing strategy now she was still struggling to come up with one when a dark avian shape detached itself from the branches, startled by her descent, and hurtled into her face. So her eyes bulged. Birdie, no! Birdie, yes. The juvenile nevermore saw her too late and loosed a startled squawk as it smashed headlong into her chest. Aura flared. Ruby instinctively caught the little creature with both arms before it could hurt itself. Unfortunately, that meant she could draw a crescent rose. Result: she smashed through the trees. There was nothing more she could do about but curl into a ball and used her semblance Imperfect as it was, it didn't quite work the way she wanted. Branches scraped at her face and arms, nearly spurring a transformation out of sheer reflexes. There was no graceful descent, no whirl of death to protect her from harm. Ruby didn't have a landing strategy, more a crushing strategy, really. Her feet somehow hit the ground before sheer momentum ripped them out from underneath her. She skidded once, smacked into a tree, then slid down it with a growl. With a groan, the little Nevermore in her arms made a pitying sound. Ruby toppled back, eyes spinning in her head. Nice birdie. Good birdied. The faint sound of clapping reached her eyes. Not bad. A familiar voice laughed. I give it a 9. Ruby's heart skipped a beat. The Nevermore wrinkled in her grasp, and she released it. The tiny creature cawed once and winged up to land on someone's shoulder. Thank the gods Ospen had disabled the cameras. If anyone saw this, they'd go absolutely ballistic. She looked up, already knowing who she would find there. Why a 9? Naruto beamed back at her, wholly at his ease as he stroked the little bird's plumage. 'Cause I beat you here. And Silver eyes bemused blue widened. Ruby sniffled. Naruto heard it. He still didn't run. Hey, partner. It flipped her switch. Ruby hit him at speed, all but crashing into his chest. He caught her by the waist and spun her around, bleeding off her momentum before setting her down. She didn't care if she looked foolish doing this. She'd found herself a partner, and her first choice at that. Mission accomplished. She didn't care who else was on her team. And the little Nevermore was sitting on her head now, and it liked her. Really, everything was going up roses. Scree! Until it wasn't. A shadow fell over them both, one that had the two teens looking up. Not a shadow, a bird, a very large bird. Naruto looked up. Ruby joined him. They looked up some more, eyes bulging as an obviously titanic Nevermore winged down and landed before them. Beady red eyes fixed Ruby, narrowed, not upon her, but rather the small feathery form nesting in her hair. Ruby, Naruto whispered. I think you've got it, baby. The little Reaper gulped, trying to move slowly. Ruby raised her hands. Nice birdie. The giant Nevermore lunged him. Not a nice birdie. Yang heard the Nevermore's outraged shriek echoed into the distance. Meh. She shrugged once. They're probably fine. Maybe. A high-pitched scream pierced the forest. A moment later, she grimaced at the bestial roar that chased it. It sounded disturbingly like Naruto. All right, not fine. Previews. What is the meaning of this? James' face was the piece of innocence. I sent no soldiers. Osmond felt an old and ancient rage stir in him. Those children are under my protection. I sent no soldiers. Stop repeating yourself. You're not a puppet. James squeezed the radio in his grasp. Move in. Why are they attacking us? How live I know? They shouldn't be. Something's stirring them up. Ruby looked left. Ruby looked right. Me? I'm the leader? Why me? I've never led anything. Ruby scowled. Then she plunged down in a red dervish of death. Crescent rose, a whirl of red and black metal all around her. Nothing was spared. End of chapter 16. Embers of Hope by Neon Zangetsu, Chapter 17, Sins of the Father, Fragment 2. These have to be the strangest teams I've seen. You know, if I wasn't in on this whole fiasco, I'd think myself mad. Still, you've passed, even if your trial by fire wasn't quite what I expected. Sins of the Father, Fragment. What is the meaning of this, James? Why are your men attacking my students? James' face was the picture of innocence in his scroll. I sent no soldiers. Osmond felt an ancient rage stir in his chest. What little magic he still held surged, causing his two fingers to spark a wild green as he gripped the phone in his hand. A distinct, detached part of him marveled at it, if only because he couldn't recall the last time he'd felt such anger. No, wait, he did. The last time he felt such fury was when his daughters died, due to his own negligence. That had been his fault then. Not again. No, never again. He wouldn't allow it. Those children are under my protection. He squeezed his scroll tight. Call off your attack. Ironwood's expression didn't waver. I sent No soldiers. There was again that bland tone. Stop repeating yourself. The words tore from him in a low growl. You're not a puppet. I said no. Realization broke like the dawn. It wasn't James at all, but the message, one said to repeat. Osmond's fury sparked into a raging inferno, and his scroll died with a squeal of shattering electronics. He cast it down into the grass, then stalked towards the cliffs, cane in hand. He didn't understand it, couldn't comprehend it. Had James caught wind of his operation somehow? It didn't seem possible. He'd spent countless hours keeping him in the dark, stonewalling him, distracting him with less tangible threats, all in the hope of his attention would never shift, all that he would never realize just how radically things had changed. Well, he'd found out somehow, because there were soldiers in the Emerald Forest here now during initiation, no less. Not just any soldiers, but Atlas soldiers at that. Oh, they tried to cover it up in their metal black gear and masks, but Osmond knew. He recognized their movements, their formations, and the hand signals they used as they sought to flank their prey. He'd patented some of them. He patented some of them himself back in the day. These men were trained to kill. They wouldn't hesitate in the least, nor would they show mercy. James must be somewhere nearby. He'd never sanctioned this operation if he wasn't somewhere close by. If he didn't get down there, it didn't find him, didn't stop this. Sir, wait! He pivoted, ready to leap. What is it? Glinda held up her own scroll, still connected to the cameras. At first, he didn't realize who he was looking at. He didn't have a chance to. A pillar of ice burst from the Emerald Forest, rocketing upwards into the clouds. Osmond's jaw clicked open. Right, he'd forgotten about that. Glinda nudged her scroll into his grasp. They're safe, sir. She thumbed to another screen, just in time to glimpse a livid gang blast a soldier back through 3 trees. See for yourself. She thumped onto the next, and with each video, well, his anger didn't fizzle out, but it did subdue for the moment. It wasn't a fair fight in the least. This was a massacre. A slaughter. Before his very eyes, James' death squads were torn apart. On one screen, Cinder walked past half a dozen frozen statues. Not a pace away, Winter ripped a man from tree and crushed his skull in her grasp like a rotten melon. He saw it all on other screens, one on one. Coco gunned down a squad of 8, even as Mercury and Emerald threaded through a hail of gunfire. Nora whooped and drove her hammer into a man's skull. His head flew from his shoulders as she giggled. His hands trembled for different reasons this time. On yet a fourth screen, he watched a dark whip draw two more screaming into the shadows. Another forged of steel snakes down and caught 3 more. There could be no mistaking the awful sounds that followed their descent into darkness. Blake and Ilya then, screen after screen, he saw their triumph. Yang roared, and a trio of men hurtled through the forest canopy. Meanwhile, Weiss tutted along as she restrained a man with her parasite and glyphs alike. Ruby plunged down in a red dervish of death. Crescent rose, a world of red and black metal all around her. Nothing was spared. They were all of them fighting back. Even those not strictly involved with Salem were holding their own, startled by the unprovoked assault perhaps, yet defending themselves most ably as they retreated to the cliffs. It was too much to hope they'd hold back. Superior training meant not in the face of overwhelming force, and these children possessed that in spades. He could only pray that a more temperamental blonde was restraining himself. The earth shook underfoot, the faintest of tremors. That was his only warning. And then, Ruby! An awful column of crimson flame burst into the sky to rival Cinder's short-lived columns of ice-filled hoarfrost. A singular scream raged in, hot on its heels. Get your hands off my partner! Osmond returned Glinda's scroll to her, and backed towards the cliff's face. Sir, Glinda called after him. Where are you going? A weary eye glanced over his shoulder. To finish this fight. Previous. You traitor, you're just the same as me. Traitor, you say. Osmond stalked out of the burning room, green scarf smoldering away from his shoulders. Me! The spectacles clenched underfoot. He kept walking in spite of his wounds, slow steps carrying him forward. The same as you. He ripped his skein free from the wall as he strode past, sending green trailing through the air. Perhaps you're right. In your eyes, I am undoubtedly a traitor. However, I at least didn't sell my soul. Then he moved. Arnold jolted as a hand closed around his throat, rasped as he choked. I'm sorry, James. I never wanted this fate for you, but this is the way it must be. My turn. The Nevermore lunged. Bad birdie. Very bad birdie. Naruto bit out a snarl as he caught hold of the beast's snapping beak. He couldn't stop the momentum behind it. His feet bit down. He wrestled it down. He rammed a clawed hand into the side of his face. Can a team of 5 members? And Nora shrugged happily. Works for me. End of chapter 17.